Welcome back to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. Today is day 56, and we are finishing up the myths about spiritual growth. Spiritual maturity myth number 5 is spiritual growth is a personal and private matter. So, because we live in a very individual oriented society, culture, many people tend to think that spiritual growth is also a very individual, personal experience. And it is to some degree. But Rick Warren also says that it's important that um, to recognize that spiritual maturity and growth is a very interpersonal experience. He says, truth is this: Christians need relationships to grow. We don't grow in isolation from others. We develop in the context of fellowship. He uses this quote from Hebrews. Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. God intends for us to grow up in a family. He says that in the previous chapter, he pointed out the relationships are the glue that keep people connected to your church. But relationships play an even more important role in moving people to maturity. They are actually absolutely essential for spiritual growth. Christians that are not connected in loving relationships with other believers are disobeying the one another command given in God's word. And he says that if you are not having regular fellowship with other believers, you should seriously question whether or not you are really walking in the light. The quality of relationship to Christ can be seen in the quality of relationships to other believers. And he also uses some quotes from the Bible to back this up too. And he said, for example, for anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And of course, obviously, in order to love people, you actually have to relate with people. It just can't be some conceptual feeling that you might have towards people. He says that one reason many Christians never witness is because they don't know how to relate to people. Because they've never been in a small group or developed friendships, they have few relational skills. They can't relate to unbelievers because they can't even relate to believers. People must be taught how to develop relationships. Although this seems obvious, very few churches take time to teach their members how to relate to each other. Yeah, and I think that we're guilty of that too. I think that this description that people, even believers, can't relate to each other is very fair. I think that I see it, I've seen it a lot in our own church and our own movement, and yeah, that's just it's good to recognize. So the last myth is number 6. All you need is Bible study to grow. He says many evangelical churches have been built on this myth. I call them classroom churches. Classroom churches tend to be left brain oriented and cognitive focused. They stress the teaching of Bible content and doctrine, but give little, if any, emphasis to believers' emotional, experiential, and relational development. The truth is this: it takes a variety of spiritual experiences with God to produce spiritual maturity. Genuine spiritual maturity includes having a heart that worships and praises God, building and enjoying loving relationships, using your gifts and talents in service to others, and sharing your faith with lost people. Any church strategy to bring people to maturity must include all of these experiences, with special emphasis on the word all: worship, fellowship, Bible study, evangelism, ministry. Study without service produces Christians with judgmental attitudes and spiritual pride. Once again, emphasizing that point about knowledge not being enough. He says the last thing many believers need to do is go to another Bible study. They already know far more than they are putting into practice. What they need are ministry and evangelism experiences where they can apply what they already know, relational experiences like a small group where they can be held accountable for what they know, and meaningful worship experiences where they can express appreciation to God for what they know. Which, is kind of interesting because I feel like many times in our own movement, people will say that we need more understanding and more study, more education. And of course, Rick Warren is not saying that we don't need those things, but if you're in a situation where people are understanding a lot, but they're not really putting it into practice, then what needs to happen there is there needs to be a way found by pastors, leadership, or whatever to facilitate experiences and opportunities where people can put into practice what they know and be held accountable for it. He emphasizes that obviously he's not saying that study is not important, not necessarily. He actually wrote his whole book on it, But what he's saying is that it is a mistake to assume that study alone will produce maturity. It is only one component of the maturity process. People need experiences in addition to study in order to grow. Churches must have a balanced strategy for developing disciplines. So that's it for the 6 myths. And so tomorrow we'll start going into designing the strategy. Thank you.